All right, great. I think there'll probably be a few latecomers because they're being let out a bit late from the conference, but that's all right. We can make a start and they can trickle in. But even as it is, welcome. It's great to see so many people here already. My name's Ben, and like many of you, I have recently received my auto-exclusion letter from the Labour Party, along with a number of comrades in here, along with councillors like Pam Fitzpatrick, along with Ken Loach, of course. And Ken Loach has actually sent a message to this meeting, sent his greetings, hopes it goes very well, which is obviously a very welcome message for us to get. Today, though, we've obviously seen even worse than just letters of expulsion. We've seen comrades, I don't know if Katie's in the room, but Katie was one delegate, elected delegate, not allowed into the conference. They threatened to call the police on her when she tried to get in. We had another comrade dragged out of the conference, just for Johnny, wherever he is, just for wearing they spotted his t-shirt, this Starmer Out t-shirt, there he is. He was wearing his Starmer Out t-shirt. He got a bit hot, took his jacket off, and they kicked him out immediately, dragged him out. And I think the police took your name, didn't they?
Well, they had the name from the past.
Yeah, outrageous. And then I think Alex was dragged out of the conference as well. He got a bit of a shout in as he was being kicked out the door. And another delegate, Joe, he managed to get on the stage and he struck a blow back for us. And if you haven't seen the video, that, check out the Socialist Appeal social media. I think it is now up on there. I think we've put it up. And that would be great watching. And that's the kind of fight back we need, because this is brazen thuggery from Starmer and the Labour leadership. And there's no pretense about why they're coming for us. It's because we're Marxists. They've said that our aims and our values as Marxists are incompatible, they say, with the leadership. It's because we've been fighting the Labour right and their pro-capitalist policies consistently and systematically for years. That's why they're coming for us. And Starmer wants to make the party safe for capitalism. That's his mission. And that's why they're expelling the Marxists. But Marxism, of course, is compatible with the Labour Party. And that's one of the things we're here to discuss now, isn't it? We can set the record straight, set out what is Marxism, what does it stand for, what do we stand for, what have we been fighting for in the Labour Party. And you can set that against Starmer's extremely bland, I bet none of you have read it, who's read it, the 12,000 words thing that he wrote this week. Set that against that, and we can work out, we can make the case for what are the real values of the Labour movement. Is it what we stand for, or is it what Starmer sets out? I think the answer is quite clear. And we also need to talk about what we're going to do now to fight for those ideas, the genuine traditions of working class struggle in the British Labour movement today. What's the next step? What's the plan? So that's what we're discussing tonight. Rob Sewell is the editor of the Socialist Appeal newspaper, and so Rob's going to kick off the discussion, and then there'll be time for questions, contributions, that sort of thing. All right? Rob.
Well, thanks, Ben. Welcome, comrades and friends, to the Lion's Den. Clearly, we are at quite a crucial time in the development of the Labour movement, and there's probably a lot of confusion, isn't it, out there? I think there was a number of delegates who were hoping that the tide could have been turned, that David Evans could have been stopped, and there'd be some light at the end of the tunnel. But of course, give credit where credit's due. The right wing are determined as ever and will use whatever methods they choose in order to get the ends that they want. I mean, I actually like history, or some of you know I wrote a book about Chartism recently, and anniversaries. And of course, this month is the 90th anniversary of the greatest betrayal in the Labour Party in 1931, where Ramsay MacDonald and a number of his cohorts stabbed the Labour Party in the back and joined a national government with the Tories and the Liberals, which conducted an onslaught against the British working class in the 1930s. And I say that because, there are certain parallels we can draw. First of all, that betrayal is not new in the Labour Party, unfortunately. The Labour Party was created by ordinary men and women to fight for the interests of the working class. In 1918, and the impact of the First World War and the Russian Revolution, it adopted a clause called Clause 4, which was a socialist aspiration of the party. And that was an aspiration of working people, if you like. The most politically conscious workers in Britain realised that the problems that the working class faced arose from capitalism and this system of exploitation. And until you get rid of that, you will never solve any of the problems faced by working people. And therefore, they aspired to this aim, because the Labour Party was taken over by those who were interested in maintaining the status quo. In fact, when the Labour Party was born, the ruling class tried to destroy the Labour Party, tried to prevent the trade unions from financing the Labour Party. But when they realised they couldn't destroy the party, they thought the next best thing was to take it over, infiltrate it, put in leaders into the party who would maintain a grip on the party and prevent it moving in that particular direction. And that's what we've had since Ramsay MacDonald. And of course, the events themselves condition the impact in the Labour Party above all else and the working class movement. And we're at the crossroads really insofar as the working class. I mean, we're faced with the greatest crisis of capitalism for 300 years. You see the immediate crisis now of shortages in the shops, of shortages of drivers, of the impact of restrictions on trade, of supply chains broken up and so on because of Brexit, etc., etc. The impact of the crisis is beginning to bear down, and we haven't been asked to pay for the bill yet. 400 billion, if you like, has been borrowed by the Tory government to bail out the capitalist system. Of course, the working class, as in 2008, 2009, 2010, and the next 10 years that followed of austerity, had to pay the bill of bailing out capitalism. And of course, these affect the workers. We've seen the conditions have deteriorated. You know, we had the biggest fall in real wages in the last decade, since any decade, going back to the Peterloo massacre of 1819. You know, we talk about the stress in work, the deteriorating conditions in working life, the fact you have to work longer for less, and all those at a time when science and so on should be giving us the benefits, you know, of these advantages, the possibilities that are there. Because capitalism is not interested in that, it's interested in maximising profitability. And therefore the working class always suffers in the capitalist system. After all, profit comes from the unpaid labour of the working class. And that's why they squeeze the working class. That's why they attack the working class. Of course, the Tory government, and now we've seen the new Labour people are talking about they need to be responsible. You know, we have to balance the books, we have to be careful with the money. They're preparing the way, if they got the power, to introduce austerity as well. Because on the basis of capitalism, there's no other way out. But we have to understand what has been going on. I mean, what we are facing, and I think everybody is aware of that, is an all-out civil war in the Labour Party. It's been going on for the last 18 months. Many of us will argue it's been going on for the last 6 years, ever since Corbyn was elected, where the interests of capitalism, which were concentrated in the parliamentary Labour Party, this is the cesspit, if you like, where what you have in the PLP, the majority, of course there are, you know, comrades in the PLP who are far different and would side with us, but the vast bulk of the Parliamentary Labour Party are made up of careerists, are agents of the ruling class within the Labour Party. They are a fifth column within the Labour Party. Yes, they are a cancer within the Labour Party, gnawing away at the Labour Party for its own interests to maintain the party under the thumb of the establishment itself. Keep it harmless. Don't let the Labour Party become radical. Above all, make it so it subverts it doesn't subvert to the ideas of public ownership and socialism. And when Starmer talks about, yeah, we've got to get rid of socialist appeal, ban socialist appeal, because socialist appeal and the Labour Party has different values, he says. Well, you know, we can go along with that point to a certain degree. Socialist appeal does stand for certain values, certain traditions. That is the fundamental socialist transformation of society and the ending of capitalism once and for all. That's what we stand for. And that's what we believe is the historic mission of the working class, not only in Britain, but internationally, because it's an international question, of course. Whereas Starmer and the right wing also represent their own values. And those are the values of the market, of capitalism, of the establishment, of the status quo. That's their values. And therefore they are back to the hilt, aren't they? Why are they so adamant? Why are they so aggressive? Let's be clear about it. As I said, give the devil his due, despite within this very religious setting at the moment. The right wing are ferocious because they feel behind them the support of capitalism. They feel the support of the ruling class because they represent the ruling class. The papers, the media, the whole establishment supports the right wing in whatever they do to take on the left. And of course, that's what gives them the courage in inverted commas, of course, but determination to do whatever it takes. They don't care about democracy. They don't care about the rules. If they're in the way, they will sweep them away. And by the way, it's not a new thing. They always have done it. Witch hunting in the Labour Party is not new. It's been there for a long time. You know, in 1920, the Communist Party was formed in Britain, and they applied to affiliate to the Labour Party. Because lots of other parties, the Independent Labour Party, applied for affiliation. Why can't the Communist Party? Because that was a danger, and the right wing blocked it. Although he could be a member of the Communist Party and the Labour Party. Paradoxically, right up to 1924, then the blocs came down. And then they developed anybody who tried to raise their head in the Labour Party, fighting for real socialism, was shut down or expelled, like Nye Bevan, 1939. You know, and many also lost the whip in Parliament, you know, for defying. I mean, the right wing doesn't bother with that. And that applies to the trade unions as well, by the way. You know, we've got relatively democratic unions, you could say. I mean, I know, up until 1949, if you're a member of the Communist Party, you could not stand even as a shop steward or any official within the Transport and General Workers Union. In other words, there was a witch hunting atmosphere even in the unions. So the right wing have always had this, you know, they don't mess about. They are there to protect their interests and the interests of capitalism itself. And therefore we have to know who we are dealing with here. And we are dealing with the direct agents of capitalism within the Labour Party, and also they exist in the trade unions as far as the right wing are concerned. They're like that, as we know. We see that with Unison, although Unison's moved to the left. Oh no, they've now pulled the strings on the delegation and the General Secretary in order to prop Starmer up and so on and so forth. So we know what these people are like. They're not Democrats, they never will be, and they're there to represent the interests of big business and the establishment. Therefore, as far as I'm concerned, they are the enemy as well. They are the Tories in our ranks, and therefore they should be treated as that. The idea of forgive me again, the broad church is a load of baloney. There's never been a broad church. The right wing has always controlled the Labour Party. They can have a little bit of a left wing there, as long as the left wing are gagged. But the only thing difference this time was in 2015. The heavens fell down. Jeremy Corbyn was elected leader of the Labour Party, one member, one vote. Hundreds of thousands joined the Labour Party, £3 a shot to vote for this man. Turned everything upside down. The Blairites had controlled everything up till then. They were on the way to destroying the Labour Party, by the way. And Corbyn, because he represented something different, against austerity, more radicalism and so on, touched the nerve, and wham! It set off this huge movement of people into the party looking for fundamental change. Young people, look at Glastonbury, for God's sake. You know, Jerry's a little bit older than me, and there he was, a bloody rock star. Young people, look at this. Not because of Jeremy Corbyn, I don't think, but what he represented. There was something different against the old, bloody, corrupt, two-party, three-party, whatever you like kind of system, twiddly-dee, twiddly-dum. You know, the Tories weren't doing too well. Get right-wing Labour in then to clear up the mess, discredit them. Like, get the Tories back in then, after they'd cleared up the mess. We know the game has been happening for a long time. But the Corbinism represented a fundamental and a fundamental threat to the ruling class of this country. And the ruling class of this country, believe me, are not soft. They're vicious in protecting their power, their prestige, their interests and their profits. And they will do anything to protect their interests. And that's why they decided that they would mobilise this fifth column in the Parliamentary Labour Party and a few crumbs outside councillors and goodness knows what has-beens to try and sabotage the Labour Party, discredit Corbyn, and in that way destroy Corbinism. It reminds me of this great film, I don't know if you've seen it, Spartacus, wonderful film. I think it was produced in 1959, if I'm not mistaken. It broke the blacklist in the United States. Because Trumbo actually was the scriptwriter of this famous film of a Thracian slave who led a revolt of the oppressed, of the slaves against the empire of Rome. And when Cracus, this senator, this general senator, was sent to defeat Spartacus with his armies, he said, "I go not simply to kill Spartacus, but the spirit of Spartacus." In the same way, the ruling class didn't want to just get rid of Corbyn. They wanted to kill the spirit of Corbinism, root it out of the movement, destroy it. There are many parallels in history. When Charles II came to the throne in 1660, after, if you know your history, 1649, Britain was a republic because we cut the head of Charles I off. We abolished the House of Lords, abolished the monarchy. We had a republic. But when the counter-revolution got back to power 10 years later, in 1660, they wreaked vengeance. And not only did they wipe out the Cromwellian period, and he declared his reign was from 1649 and not from 1660, they even dug up the corpse of Oliver Cromwell and hung him because of the retribution. As an example to the masses, to those who dare try and subvert the ruling class. And that's what they're trying to do in the Labour Party. That's it's not. You can prettify for all you want. That's the aim. If they've managed now to suspend Jeremy Corbyn from the Labour Party, they'll try and stop him standing in the next election. You can bet your life on it. No, let's not have any illusions, comrades. There is a counter-revolution going on in the Labour Party, which has not been completed yet, but they're trying to complete it. They've driven out, 120,000 members already. They've demoralised a whole layer of people. They've suspended and expelled and shut down and gerrymandered. You name it, they've done it. In order to what? Purify the Labour Party. Destroy the old Labour Party. Destroy Corbinism for good. And to get it back reclaim the Labour Party for capitalism as an organ that will defend the capitalist system. There's a problem in that, because the unions as well, by the way, are affiliated to the Labour. They helped create the Labour Party. That's a bit of a contradiction. But nevertheless, that's their aim. To destroy Corbinism, not 150,000, what was his name? Tony Blair. So we needed to get rid of 300,000 members of the party to cleanse it. And that's what they're going to do. That's the whole idea. And they've had some success, haven't they? And I think, look, I'm not here. I think Jeremy Corbyn has been incredible in the way he has stood up in the last 5 years to the rat bags and the saboteurs and the backstabbers who tried to destroy him, and the press and all, and they go into the Parliamentary Labour Party meetings on a Monday night, this bear pit. But we made some mistakes. I say we, the royal we, the left. You know, there's no point in saying, oh well, that was great and let's forget. And no. We don't want to. Those who do not learn from history will be doomed to repeat it, says George Santayana. Absolutely correct. And in my opinion, because as far as I'm concerned, we shouldn't prettify things. We shouldn't sweep things under the carpet for fear of, offending someone. Life's too short, comrades, and our mission is too great. Capitalism is in deep crisis. And of course the working class is going to suffer no end. But of course that's going to result in convulsions in the labour movement. The working class is not going to take it lying down. They will sooner or later need to mobilise. And I've seen it, I've been around. I'm not expelled yet. I don't want to know what the hell's the matter with them. I've been in the party now for 55 years. I've seen them come and I've seen them go. But this time they're going for broke. Believe me or not, they got rid of Benism, they got rid of Bevanism. By Christ, they're going to really go for this one because it frightened them so much. It terrified them. They lost control. They're never going to do it again, they say. And that's why and the left, my God, come on, learn some lessons. In fact, I would say, all right, I'm part of the left, although I was very critical. I thought we should have gone for the jugular. Let's not mess about. These people are agents of the ruling class. We should have gone for introducing automatic reselection of MPs across the board, straight away. And when Corbyn was forced to stand in 2016 for election again, I would have said to all of those people, all those MPs who demanded it, okay, but all of you will do it as well. You'll all face a reselection as well in your constituencies. Yes, my friends. A momentum, if it had been worth its salt, would it did? Yes. And we'll carry it through. Look, the members were desperate to change things because my MP's Margaret Hodge. So I know how things can be. I know what the right wing are like. And I know that if the left-wing membership were allowed to do what they wanted to do, they would have deselected these people because they knew they were stabbing Corbyn in the back. Every 2 minutes they were rushing to the press, the TV and so on. They sabotaged the 2017 general election. They preferred a Tory government than a Corbyn government. They are, in my book, traitors. Traitors to the working class. Traitors to the membership of the Labour Party. Traitors to socialism. And I don't want to mince words. That is the reality of it. They shouldn't be there. But we need to, the left should have realised this. Should have understood what we were facing. And mobilised instead. Oh, we have to be careful. We don't want to split the party. We have to have unity. How can you have unity with people who are stabbing you in the back? We have to realise who the enemy are. And of course, you give your enemy a little inch and they'll take a bloody mile. And that's what's happened. They were allowed to coexist. They were allowed to spit in our faces. We would wipe it off and perhaps offer conciliation with a broad church. We need unity. Well, I was going to swear, but not so, my friends, not so. As far as we're concerned, we should say the truth, isn't it? You know, let's start from fundamentals. Tell the truth. And if you tell the truth, you can't go far wrong of what these people represented and why they should never be there. They're Tory careerists. And in the Labour Party, we want fundamental fighters for the interests of working people. That's what we want. And that's why we need to clear the stable out. Clear it all out. And that could have been done. But I'm afraid even the left leaders were saying, oh, hang on. I know, because when we closed for, we had a comrade up here at the back here who moved a motion to bring back Clause 4 in the Unite Policy Conference. Unfortunately, he has a phone call from Corbyn's office. Do not do it. We don't want it done. And as a result, the National Executive of Unite opposed it when they should have supported it. I mean, what is Clause 4 but the principles of socialism, for God's sake? And what do we have in our party card today? What's it about, you know, the market and free competition and other bullshit of that order, which is in reality an acceptance of capitalism? We're against capitalism. Of course, not all are. You know, I always remember that famous, she was on the radio, I think it was her name, Siobhan McDonough, is it? Member of Parliament, I think someone in South London, where she equated anti-capitalism to anti-Semitism. To be anti-capitalist was to be anti-Semitic. I mean, they were rewriting the rules, rewriting everything. Of course, the press and all that were all in favour of them. As many comments would say, Christ, if Corbyn was leaving the Labour Party now, and all the things that are happening, and 120,000 had left and all the other things, they would have been howling for his blood. But because he represented, he was the aspirations he represented of the millions of people who were looking for something new. And that's what they feared, not so much Corbyn, but the forces that he had unleashed. The people, the forces behind him that threatened the interests of capitalism itself. And we have to understand as a left, for God's sake, that we can't make those mistakes again, surely. Because if you do, I mean, the idea of thinking that the right wing are part of the movement, and then somehow we can get into a nice little cosy arrangement with them, is pie in the sky. They're interested in one thing, that is protecting and preserving the position of capitalism in society and in the Labour Party. As long as we understand that, we know what we're dealing with. But if we blur it over, then obviously, and that's what was happening, we had to appease them. In some way, if you appease them, they'll be okay. But remember, you know, Jess Phillips, I won't stab Corbyn in the back, I'll stab him in the front. And Lord Mandelson, I get up every morning wanting to know how I can get rid of Corbyn. Of course, they're in the party, there's no problem there. You know, because the right wing look after their own. And therefore, yes, we made some mistakes because we had a chance, an opportunity, isn't it? Which don't come along very often to deal with these people. And we let it slip. And once you let it slip, they take, weakness invites aggression. And the right wing are very aggressive. And now we have this Wonder Man, Starmer and Evans, who are now going to use their position in order to further the counter-revolution. Because what they've done, as far as I know they've managed to secure the vote of the General Secretary. They're now going to conference, I understand, to push up the threshold now of how many MPs are needed in order to nominate a leader of the party to 20%, which means in these terms 40 MPs. The left would never get 40, in my opinion. I don't know, you know, it's not going to be done. So they've sewn it up. And that's the state of play at the present time. Unfortunately, we are paying the price for our failure in the past. And we mustn't do that. We have to learn lessons. In other words, in my opinion, you fight fire with fire. You mustn't give an inch. We must, and we're not doing anything wrong. We say that we represent the interests of the majority of members who need more democratic rights to have greater accountability. It's as simple as that. And we go back to our socialist aspirations because we have the greatest crisis of capitalism for 300 bloody years. I mean, Keir Hardie must be spinning in his grave. And you have, was it Lisa Nandy? Lisa Nandy? My God, came out the other day in an interview saying, how can he put forward that we should nationalise everything? Of course, we don't say nationalise everything. We're not in favour of nationalising the fish and chip shop or the corner kebab shop. You know, the little Tesco's on the corner, you know, the little shops. But the giant firms, the banks, the insurance companies, which are the commanding heights of this economy, we want them. We don't want the little bits, the minnows and the little small fry. We want the big giant fish. That's what we want in order to plan the economy. To do away with the anarchy of capitalism. And where you've got the capitalist system, you have anarchy. Where you've got people who are desperate for work, who can't find work, or have to work on a pittance of all the other ills of capitalism. And things getting better. When I was a kid, they were talking about that. And the reformist leaders, oh, give us a few more Labour governments, and you'll be in Wonderland, you know. Well, Wonderland's on there. You know, everything will be great. You wouldn't know what you're doing with your leisure time. You're going to do everything's going to be fine. Everybody's going to be middle class. Do you feel middle class? Christ almighty, that's what they promised us. It's all hot air. We're worse now than we were 50 years ago and 60 years ago. We're not going forward, we're going backwards. And that's the whole position of capitalism. So the point is, but are the right wings sitting pretty? Are they in for life? Are they in there? I would say, hang on a minute. I know when Tony Blair had his little counter-revolution in the 1990s, well, he had the world economy was expanding. They had a bit more room, you know, to give certain concessions. Today, there's no room for concessions. It's not reforms, it's counter-reforms. And therefore, the working class is going to resist those attempts to rob it and to attack it, whether it's a Tory government or a Labour government. And as far as I'm concerned, this idea, talk about they won't have a Labour, they don't care about a Labour government. They're not interested in a Labour government. All they're interested in is purging the Labour Party of Corbinism. That's their job. That's Starmer's job, not to win another election. They know they're not going to win the next election. Although what they could do is, I think Boris Johnson will be out. I think the Tory position is going to collapse because sooner or later, you can see what's happening. All these red seats, they're not going to hold those seats for long because of the crisis itself. So I think the Tory government's position is going to collapse. Labour will go up a bit, but they won't be able to get a majority. And what I'd be concerned about, like in 1931, they could cross the floor and form a national government because they're talking about so much about national unity and the flag and British interests and all the rest of it, and getting into bed with big business, because that's the essence of Starmer's approach. So therefore we have to understand this is a very, how can I say, fragile position for the right wing. And as the unions also have been shaken up with Unite, where 2/3 of Unite members voted for the left, that Coyne, the right-winger, was completely thrashed. And also, in Unison, for God's sake, Unison was a union of the arch right-wing for the last 20 years and propped up the right-wing in the Labour Party. And that has shifted to the left. The majority of the National Executive Committee have now shifted to the left. Unfortunately, it's not trickled through yet. There's a big bust-up on who controls the Labour Party delegation. Still elections going on, but they're going to shift to the left. Of course, are the ruling class going to give up? I was talking to the comrades in Unison. I said, don't have any illusions. They're going to fight like holy hell to sabotage you like they did Corbyn. They're going to go to holy hell to try and undermine you as well. So therefore you have to fight fire with fire. Don't give them an inch. Mobilise the rank and file in order to defeat the right wing. But it's a job we have to do in the Labour movement. The Labour Party question is part of the Labour movement question. And the unions can dictate the situation in the Labour Party if they wanted to. That's why we have to transform the unions. And the working class is being transformed. It takes a bit of time, but I tell you what, it's not a slow process. Change plays as Marxists know dialectically. There is a slow accumulation, gives rise to a big change in the situation, a transformation. And that's what you can have in the unions. And also that will affect the Labour Party itself. So the right wing, they can get away with murder, but there's a limit. There's a limit. And by Christ, there's going to be one hell of a backlash in the Labour movement and the working class. But I say we have to have people there, when the left reasserts itself, we're not going to repeat the mistakes of the past. And that's why I was thinking, Christ, if Socialist Appeal had 10,000 members in 2015, you wouldn't have been in this bloody mess you got today. I tell you that now. Because we would have given backbone to the left at that time, locally and nationally. Because we are not prepared to stomach the right wing. We're not prepared to stomach capitalism. And therefore we are prepared to fight all the way along the line, whatever it takes. And if we can build a force, I believe it's possible, given the youth that are attracted to the ideas now of Marxism, that it is possible to build a movement like that in the next 2, 3, 4 years in preparation for the volcanic eruption that's going to take place in Britain. Sleepy old Britain. I tell you, it's going to be upside down Britain. And the movement of the working class will also affect the movement of the trade union and labour movement. And with, yes, a mighty force, I'll say, yeah, 5,000-10,000 Marxists giving backbone to the left, we can transform the situation and create organisations that are not going to subvert themselves to capitalism, but will overthrow capitalism. It's socialism in our time, I would say. Despite these are setbacks, but put them in proportion, put them in perspective. Because if you don't, you will get lost. The class struggle is not going to be purged out of the movement. You can ban the Socialist Appeal, but you can't ban the ideas of socialism and socialist revolution, because it's instinctive in the working class when they're up against the wall. And they will be up against the wall. So we are very confident. We are very smiley. Because we can see the future. We're not looking at the past and thinking, oh my God. We look at the future and say the working class are going to fight like hell, because they've got no alternative faced with this massive crisis in Britain and internationally. But it's a crisis of leadership then. We have to have a leadership that's going to go all the way and not compromise with capitalism, and fight, yes, for the socialist transformation of society as the only way out for the working class itself. So I hope you will join us in that fight, join us in that future, to fight for this revolution in Britain and internationally.
Speech you'll hear all week, I imagine. For anybody who is not yet involved but wants to get involved, you can sign up at the back on your way out and leave your details and find out a bit more about how to get involved. But in the meantime, we have got a bit of time now for questions, obviously, but also comments and contributions, thoughts from anybody who would like to come in. So I've seen the comrade in the blue shirt over here, and anybody else, stick your hand up.
Yeah, my name's Bob. I'm from Swansea Constituency Labour Party. I'm not sure a delegate or active supporter of the Labour Party, Marxists and Labour Against Wishers, so another prescribed organisation. First of all, I'd like to show solidarity. It was Gisela Corbyn who was kicked out. No, there were a couple of people who were kicked out of conference today, and I know somebody got onto the stage, so a bit of a fight back, so congratulations to that. Couple of things, Rob. I enjoyed the speech. Firstly, on Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, I've been in the Labour Party now for a good 16, 17 years, and you alluded to it. You know, the Labour Party meetings that I was going to were quite passive and quite tired in composition. You know, and then Jeremy Corbyn came in by dint of an accident, and there was like this hope that came with him, and lots of new membership came into the Labour Party, and I think, was it 2 or 3 years ago, was it the highest, or Labour Party was the highest membership across Europe for that like party, so great stuff, great stuff. But I think it's important, and again you alluded to it, about learning by our own mistakes. I'd be the first to admit that there was hope and there was inspiration when Corbyn joined the Labour Party. But there's still now this uncritical approach that people have within the party towards the left in the Labour Party and to Jeremy Corbyn. One particular incident, I remember Jeremy Corbyn being interviewed on that by that hideous man, Andrew Neil, just before his election defeat, and he said to him, well, what do you think about anti-Semitism? And and I was pleading for Jeremy Corbyn to say it's an exaggeration for political means. Now I know he subsequently did that, but he didn't at the time, and I think that was a problem, and I don't think we should be afraid to say that Jeremy Corbyn, despite his positive sides, he had negative sides as well, and I think ultimately it was all about Corbyn not rocking the boat and trying to get the Labour Party elected at any cost. I think it was his electoralism. So that's my first point. And of course, when Chris Williamson, Ken Livingstone and Jackie Walker were kicked out of the party, I think that was the ramifications of a passivity towards the question at the time. And my second point, which I'm going to finish on, you mentioned it, and I was going to anyway, so thank you, clause 4. I'm also in Welsh Labour Grassroots, and I know we've got some supporters in Welsh Labour Grassroots that will be moving the issue of clause 4 to bring it back. And I've had arguments with your comrades over the question. You see, for me, and I'd like to get your opinion on this, you see, for me, clause 4, when was it produced? At the time of the Russian Revolution. Who was it produced by? The Fabian Society. Sydney Webb, liberal, middle class. And I think it was designed, drafted to, shape society or socialism into a very safe way at the time. I think a new clause 4 needs to be initiated. Absolutely. I'm not for the existing one that existed then. I mean, why can't we have a clause 4 that states, quite rightly, which I believe in, that all socialists or social societies and parties and movements are under one umbrella, that we support the rule, and the rural capital should be replaced with the rule of the working class. Why can't we challenge the state in clause 4? Why can't we raise Republican demands, challenge the monarchy, the House of Lords? What about accountability, electoral reform and proportional representation? What about salaries MPs? Why can't we say that MPs in the House shouldn't be paid more than the average skilled member of the working class, wherever that be, 40,000, 45,000 pounds, whatever that is per annum? So that to me is more progressive clause 4 rather than looking towards something which I don't think was necessarily socialist in nature.
Okay, I'm very keen to hear from anybody else. I haven't seen any other hands yet.
So I was on the conference floor today, and I think we got a taste of a bit of the arrogance with which the right-wing establishment treat the membership, and Margaret Beckett kind of totally breezed over like points of order being raised from the floor, trying to rush through the NEC kind of approval vote. I think the way in which they really see the Labour Party and indeed the whole Labour movement as theirs, as something that they can be kind of under their control for life, these kind of mandarins, really came through. And like Rob emphasised, these people are the agents of the establishment of the ruling class, and that's their point of support. and their point of support isn't so much in the membership at all. But I think what they're going to inherit, really, if they continue down this road, is a stinking corpse. And they're not going to win anything, obviously. And when talking to youth, talking to young people on the streets in the Marxist societies, it's no surprise that these young people who are enthused by Corbyn are turning away from the Labour Party now in droves, because they're totally disgusted by the absolute vapidity, if that's a word, of Keir Starmer, the total lack of politics, the kind of disgusting sort of tacking to kind of patriotism and all this stuff, and it completely rings totally hollow. But like Rob emphasised, Keir Starmer's mission isn't to make the Labour Party win elections or win to support, it's to make it safe for capitalism. But talking to the public, talking to young people, the desire for those socialist policies that Corbyn kind of first raised is still really, really strong and really, really evident. And so I wouldn't necessarily waste any particular time trying to get those young people, really active in CLP meetings at the moment. But I have absolutely every faith that the class struggle will energise those young people into fighting for socialism, and the whole kind of organisations of the labour movement will kind of will echo that. I think it's important to recognise that the communist parties of the 20s were formed out of splits in the Second International, after the biggest betrayal that the working class had ever seen. And so it is still worth, I think, doing some organising in the Labour Party as revolutionary socialists. But and to respond to a comrade over here, I think it's true that we should definitely recognise the limitations of Corbinism as well. It was the fact that his reformist politics, basically, he was committed to reforming society, reforming capitalism bit by bit, and that leads to compromise and ultimately to defeat. That's what we should draw out. The fact that it was ultimately, if you're committed to reforming capitalism via Parliament, then you will be defeated.
All right, we've got comrade here.
Maybe, I don't know. But anyway, the point is that I wasn't aware until a few hours ago, is that there are petrol crews out there. You can't get hold of any petrol. And this is extraordinary. It's absolutely extraordinary. You have other shortages in the shops, but a shortage of petrol is a hell of a thing. It almost brought up the Blair government in, when was it, 2000, before all that stuff. When a similar thing happened. Now, I don't know, I know this is news to me. As I said, the first time I knew about it when that bad joke was said to me by a friend. But you can see, as well as the other shortages going on, capitalism, I suppose, is failing this country. It's not working. The government is kind of making it up as they go along, as we all know. Boris Johnson is doing that. But the thing is falling apart. And this just, illustrates in a small, very petty way to some extent, but it illustrates the sheer crisis that this country and this system, capitalism, is facing, and we are facing as a whole. As I said, it's a minor thing, but on the other hand, shorts of petrol, the people have petrol for their cars, it really shakes people's confidence in the system. It really, really does. I think the government, these Tories are going to take every measure they possibly can, to make sure petrol is supplied, because otherwise, it would be very, very bad for them. And of course, and this is perhaps where another bad joke comes in, but of course, at this time, when, any decent, half-decent, quite winning Labour leader would be really having a go at the Tories, what of course does Keir Starmer do? He purges the left. And you can see the whole emphasis of this conference and the build-up to this conference is purely to bash the socialists, ban the Marxists, ban the left. That's his whole consideration. Because, of course, as we know, as the speaker said already, Keir Starmer is not particularly interested in winning the national election. What he's interested in is making the Labour Party safe for capitalism. That's what he wants to do. And finally, my second point, and I'll be brief on this, Chair. I was there at the Socialist Appeal outside the conference centre this afternoon, and this woman, you know, a right-wing woman, with all the sort of backing, as the speaker said during his lead-off, you know, backing of the establishment of the ruling class behind her. She said, oh, well, you know, you want 10 more years of Tory government, you want 10 more years of rule. And I said, well, it's nonsense, because Starmer, as we know, will not win the next general election. He can't win the general election. He's not going to win the election with his policies, with right-wing policies. They're not going to inspire the youth of this country. There is no way at all he is going to win this general election. That's government. It's not just not possible. So, you know, so you can see, you know, this is not like, you know, these people think, oh, well, you know, this is like the 1990s and Blairism and that sort of thing, and some of that sometimes seeps into the left wing as well. That's just absolute nonsense. There's no way that's going to happen. So, of course, you know, so you can see, you know, the feature is, as the speaker says, you know, the left need to learn the lessons of what's happened in the last 5 or 6 years. You know, the Marxists here can provide a backbone to it. We can provide, you know, the lessons. We can provide the analysis, you know, for the movement that will be revived in the next few years. You see, you know, talked about the unions. The unions will put an awful lot of promotion at the moment. That will in turn feed back into the back in some time. But whatever happens, you know, the point is that only with Marxist ideas and a Marxist analysis can really the movement go forward and build a socialist movement. Thank you.
I came here as the delegate for Union Central and Acting Labour Party. I suspect I'm no longer the delegate for Thanks. I wanted to respond somewhat to the comrade over here. I mean, certainly I was coming really into my political life at the beginning of the Corbyn movement. I hadn't long become a Marxist. And for my entire teenage and short adult life, the political situation in Britain was a desert. There was nothing. I don't think Socialist Appeal has ever spared its critical support, the critical aspect of the support for Jeremy Corbyn. We were very clear from the beginning, while supporting Corbyn, that it was its unwillingness to land the final death blow on the right wing and empower the membership to kick them out, replace them with genuine class fighters, that ultimately led to its political demise. We said that from day one, we said it all the way through, and we've said it ever since. But you can't ignore what the Corbyn movement represented. It was an explosive movement. It swept aside everything else. It made everything else in British politics, certainly in British left-wing politics of the last period, look obsolete. I mean, you can't have a situation where the leaders of the Labour Party have got a bigger audience than the Rolling Stones at Glastonbury Festival and stand on the outside and say, well, he's not perfect, you know, he's not ideal. It's true, he had a lot of limitations and we didn't spare criticisms of those, but we couldn't stand on the outside. We had to recognise the significance of what was happening in order to be able to connect with people. And I can speak from experience because I've been very lucky to be joined to this conference with a number of new supporters of Socialist Appeal, who are precisely those young people who went through the school of Corbinism, if you like. They experienced the jubilation and also the crushing defeat, and therefore drew the lessons, and eventually arrived at revolutionary conclusions based on discussions that we had with them. And that's a story I've replicated all across the country. And in relation to the point that Comrade Jack raised at the front about Starmer and co. inheriting a stinking corpse, there is no objective basis for a right-wing reformist government. There is no optimism and growth. Things are not only going to get better. It is not the 1990s. Even that recovery was based on credit. It was facile and artificial. But the point is, you're going through a period when capitalism has just had its biggest crisis in 3 centuries. There is a record level of distrust and rejection of the status quo and of the political centre. The establishment that Starmer and the bourgeois behind him are trying to call back together has been utterly discredited. It's been blown inside out. There is nobody who's really interested. Certainly not the most active and progressive elements in British society. I mean, we talked about young people, we do, and we should. But Corbyn in 2017 won amongst all working layers of British society. He won back supporters from the working class communities that have been treated like rotten boroughs by the Blairites for years. He began to win them back with a class programme. Obviously, it ended the way it did, and there are reasons for that Rob's already outlined. But the point is, no matter how hard Keir Starmer and his colleagues tried to take control of the Labour Party, and I'll give you an example from inside conference floor, there was a motion presented by the Chingford CLP that fell because every single one of their delegates had been expelled. There wasn't a single delegate left to move that motion. They are hell-bent, and they will use every dirty tactic to win the party back. But the objective conditions and the appetite for their programme isn't there. Quite the contrary, society is polarised, society is radicalising, and more people all over the world are receptive to insurrectionary, radical and revolutionary ideas. You look at Colombia, you look at Chile, you look at the Black Lives Matter movement in America. These developments were a reflection of the deep crisis of capitalism. For a time, I think, were cut across a little bit by the pandemic. But now that we're, hopefully moving back to some form of normality, I think that desire for change is going to come back with a bang, and we have to be ready. And I'm sure we will be. Thank you.
Hi comrades, I'm Sean Hodges from Greenwich and Woolwich CLP, and also a member of or a supporter of Greenwich and Lewisham Socialist Appeal branch as well. I just want to draw a bit on that, talk about lessons. Lessons are going to be learned, and they will be learned actually, because as the comrade there has just said, people have gone through a hell of a school over the past 5 years. I wasn't a Marxist when all this kicked off. I was, I suppose what you might call a dying sort of Labour person. My family had always been Labour, that was just the way of things, they were trade unionists, all the rest of it. Not necessarily politically conscious, that came later through experience, but, the change that you've seen of people who started out that way, thinking, well, that's great, let's get a Labour government, what we have to do is vote it in, all we have to do is vote Corbyn in. Corbyn got in. The sabotage started straight away with that no mark from Cumberland CLP. I can't remember his name, but my granddad didn't like him, so he can't have been that good. This guy resigning just as soon as the vote got declared, straight away from day one. There's a sharp lesson. These people are not playing around. And that's gone on and on and on over the years. I myself, it's only anecdotal, and comments will have to accept it as such, but I myself went on that journey. I went from a relatively standard Labour person, only a voter actually at first, not even a member, then a more harder left, further and further as experience pushed me on. And eventually I found, actually these Marxists, I tell you what, they've got some pretty interesting things to say. I wonder what else they're right about. And and that isn't just me. I'm not special, comrades, if you'll allow me to say. I'm nobody special. And there are hundreds of thousands, maybe millions perhaps, that are starting to go through the same process, who have gone through the same school, and who will go through it even further when the crisis, as it is already biting, the fuel shortages and the food shortages and all the rest of it, as that starts to bite. And I think this is the point, they wanted to behead Corbinism. That's what they wanted. If they got rid of the man, Corbyn, if they got rid of him and then they started expelling everybody from the Labour Party, that would be the end of it. Lovely. Straight back to normal. Excellent. That's not going to be the case. As the Speaker said, as other comrades have said, I'm sure you all know from your experience, that's not the end of it. You can expel socialists from the Labour Party, you can expel Socialist Appeal, throw us out. I think one comrade was thrown out by security, actually. But you can do all of that. But you can't expel us from our communities. You can't expel us from our movements. You can't expel us from our trade unions. You can't take us away from the working class to which we belong. And that working class will draw the lessons. And when that happens, Jesus Christ, the Blairites are going to wish they'd never been born. Thank you.
My name's Sewell, supporter of Socialist Appeal in North London. I'm also a Labour member in Enfield Southgate CLP. I just want to say, touch on a brief points about you said, Rob. I want to make 2 points. So the first point is about this inability for the reformist leadership to fight the right wing. And one of my first Labour Party meetings, actually, I tried to put forward a resolution, and it was in defence of Chris Williamson. And so Chris Williamson basically got up, and he said what we would all say, and which was this whole anti-Semitism scandal is being whipped up for political purposes. And because of that, they suspended him from the party. But not only that, they basically, you weren't allowed to discuss within the CLP or within meetings the actual suspension. Because it was like, oh, it's an ongoing case, and it would, therefore, because it was being investigated, you couldn't discuss it because it was, ongoing. And so this rule was actually put forward by the left NEC, people, Jane Thornby. And so I wanted to speak in this meeting. I was the youngest person there, and I was denied. And so it was this very tactic and this precedent that was actually set up by the left leadership of the NEC to actually suspend Corbyn and to make sure that we couldn't discuss the case of anti-Semitism, about surrounding the suspension of Corbyn within the Labour Party. So it just, for me, that was really pertinent, and it touches on what you were saying, is this inability to open up democracy, to not trust the members to put forward political positions and to have a political discussion within the CLP. And so, and this inability to fight the right and to capitulate is obviously, it's ended in this today. And so my other point, I think it's been said a few times, but I'll make it again to re-emphasize it. But I wasn't a delegate in the conference, but I was selling a newspaper outside, and Socialist Appeal, banned newspaper, contraband newspaper, etc. And I was getting quite a lot of responses. But when David Evans got the vote of what's it called? David Evans got ratified or what have you. This woman came over to me, she started crying. And she started crying, and for me that was symptomatic of what loads of members have gone through. This woman had clearly put so much into the movement, put so much into the Labour Party over the years, and she's just seen it being smashed overnight almost. And so there must be hundreds of thousands of members that have gone through this process and haven't been exposed, I think, to what the ideas that Rob was talking about today. And we're Marxists, and we believe in the revolutionary potential of the working class. And what it's lacking is leadership, It's lacking the clarity in which Rob spoke today. And if Rob had been able to speak to thousands of Labour Party members, to hundreds of thousands of Labour Party members, we wouldn't be in the situation we are today. And so therefore, we've been instilled, we've been educated, we've gone through that process with even more commitment and desire, in our attention to theory and our attention to being Marxist. But unfortunately, these people have been demoralised, and they might leave the movement and ebb away. So I just want to say what Rob said was fantastic, and if we can all take his energy and the ideas today and go into the movement, to build the force of Marxism, I think we'll be much better off. Cheers.
Hi, thanks. Everyone's made some really great contributions so far. My name's Alex. I was a delegate for South West Hertfordshire. I was kicked out of the conference today. I was expelled from the Labour Party on Thursday for a couple of articles that I've written for Socialist Appeal. One was an article on potential bus strikes because bus workers are having their rights attacked during the pandemic. And one was, I co-wrote it, and it was about the Labour Party's turn from class politics to patriotism, flag waving and so on. And these are ideas that you wouldn't expect the Labour Party to kind of expel you for, but because they were being voiced by Socialist Appeal, they were afraid of the ideas that Socialist Appeal puts forward. And one difference, that I see between the Labour Party and Socialist Appeal is that we will, when there are differences of opinion, when there are debates, we'll have a political discussion. We won't just control things bureaucratically like the NEC did, just unilaterally deciding that Socialist Appeal was incompatible with Labour values. And so they're so afraid of justifying their ideas. They've got the capitalist press on their side, but they still won't have the debate. And they don't really have any ideas. As has been said, capitalism right now can't even afford reforms, serious reforms. We're not, the climate crisis isn't coming, it's here, it's changing the planet. And what did the Labour Party put forward? Loans for electric cars and cars. So the Labour Party doesn't have the ideas, we have the kind of far-reaching view of things because, coming down the road, capitalism failed during the pandemic. There had to be, massive state intervention, injection of money, just to keep things afloat. And so that's, going to have to be paid back eventually. And the Labour Party aren't, they're not situated in reality. That's their downfall. I think the Labour right, I should say. And so I think that people should join Socialist Appeal because we have far-reaching ideas. And we want the working class to fight, reforms won't empower the working class fundamentally. And that's why we need a fighting organisation that will, argue for putting the power in the hands of the working class.
Hi everyone, I'm Dora. I'm 22. I recently graduated from uni and I'm about to enter the world of work. And a very wise man once said, "He who has the youth has the future." And I think it's very safe to say that Keir Starmer does not have the youth. And I think it's also very simple to understand why, because what is the world that we face today as young people? We face, we're the first generation that will have a lower standard of living than our parents since records began. This kind of optimism that Rob mentioned from his childhood, from his youth, that things will only get better. People of my generation don't have that. We've never had that. We're generation austerity. Like my first political memory is the 2008 crisis, and it's pretty much been downhill from there. We face bad, overpriced housing. It's incredibly difficult to get a job. You have to be incredibly qualified and somehow have lots of experience, which is unclear how you're supposed to get it, and all this kind of stuff. And we're living in this world which is constantly marred by one crisis after the other. The climate crisis is kind of, it's no longer looming, it's here, as Alex was saying. And I think my generation, more than any other before us, is really woken up to all of the different forms of oppression and discrimination that capitalism relies on in order to keep working class people divided, in order to keep them from uniting against their common enemy. So, against this kind of all-encompassing backdrop that we have to navigate every single day as young people in education or in the world of work, what does the current leadership of the Labour Party have to offer? Nothing, really, Some reheated Blairism, a total disregard for internationalism and international solidarity, some kind of patriotic flag waving, the Queen is supposed to be good, I don't know. Kind of waving the Union Jack everywhere and ignoring the crimes of British imperialism, the history of British imperialism, an absolute disregard for the Black Lives Matter movement, actually a really, kind of condescending attitude towards young people who are interested in fighting these forms of oppression, absolute betrayal of the struggles of queer people. I don't know if people remember, when Keir Starmer went to that homophobic church and had a photo op there. But the point is, it's not just isolated kind of problems here and there. It's really that the current leadership of the Labour Party has no vision to offer to young people because, as Rob was explaining and as other speakers have said, they are beholden to capitalism, right? They can't offer an alternative because they don't want to. But that is going to end up biting them in the arse, I think, because it means that young people absolutely have no interest in these kinds of politics. They won't feel inspired to go to these meetings. They're eventually not going to feel inspired to vote for this party, if not, with a sense of disgust. And I think fundamentally, young people today, we see all of these problems. We don't need to have them explained to us. What we need is a tangible and real alternative. And that alternative is to organise for socialism. It's to organise for the overthrow of capitalism, not just for a few meagre kind of reforms here or there to make things slightly less worse on one front or another. It's to actually organise, with students, with workers in their workplaces for the overthrow of capitalism. And that's not something that Keir Starmer is ever going to offer. So it falls on our shoulders as Marxists, as activists, to provide that alternative, to go out in our workplaces, in the universities, in the schools, on the streets, in our communities, to provide that alternative and to rally people around it, because that is the only way that we can offer a future for young people, you know, not just like a hopeful or a rosy future, but given the climate crisis, any future at all. So, you know, everyone who hasn't joined us and who hasn't kind of gotten involved in this fight to do so, I urge you to do so, because it's really the only way forward that we have for humanity.
Mike, do you want to?
Yeah, my name's Mike, from Wales. Joined the Labour Party first in 1967, joined Socialist Appeal in Christmas, and I have to say this last 6 months have been fantastic. I'm full of enthusiasm, which I haven't been for 40 years. But just a warning from someone that's seen a few years and got battered at Orgrave. Starmer and Evans and the cohorts have been planning this week for the last 2 years. They've been planning exactly how they're going to shut us up. They've been planning exactly how they're not going to get the motions passed or even raised. They know exactly what they're doing, and it's been said by quite a few speakers, they have no qualms. They don't work to the rule of law, to the rule of decency. They haven't got a nice bone in their body. They want rid of us. They want rid of anyone that's going to challenge them. And I actually wonder whether we can do something this week, whether we can actually say to Starmer on Wednesday, when he's due to speak, as soon as he stands up, as soon as he goes to that lectern, we make sure that no one hears him. No one hears and I'm not going to say I'm sorry for swearing, no one hears a fucking word that he actually says. And we can do that if we start singing, if we start heckling, and what will happen is the press will latch onto that. It'll be in the papers, it'll be on the news. A few of us might get thrown out, but if there's a lot of us do it, how are they going to do that? We've heard that 1 or 2 individuals have been thrown out, dragged out. They can't do that if it's hundreds. They cannot do that if it's hundreds. This is a legitimate this would be a legitimate protest inside the Labour Party. I'll leave it there.
CLP, I'm a delegate, not for long, I guess. Also a member of supporter of Socialist Appeal, Southampton Southern branch. Just wanted to talk a bit about Marxism itself and how it's so enlightening for someone like me who's a young person. We've suffered through, like other comrades have said, the failures of Corbinism. And what really struck me is once I started studying the works of Marxism, and even Sewell wrote some books, In the Cause of Labour, Chartist Revolution, you see that these lessons, it's like you see a broken film recorder or something. They keep happening. The trade union leaderships, they keep betraying the working class. The Labour Party leadership, they keep betraying the ruling class. This has happened through the early 1900s, onwards towards the 2000s. And the thing is, the reformist leaders, they just don't learn their lessons. And I think eventually you will see more and more people my age and much older. The objective conditions will drive them towards something much more radical. And the thing is, we need to be bold out there and show the message. As Marxists, we provide this alternative. Look at all the failures. If we keep repeating them, the same thing's going to keep happening. Unfortunately, for example, some of the other groups, like Momentum, for example, the co-chair in Southampton Momentum said, we don't need to worry about Starmer 3 days ago. A day or 2 after that, some of their members got suspended. That went very well for him, didn't it? So there you go. But as I'm trying to say, there's all this incredible knowledge we have, scientific socialism, Marxism, and the price we've paid for that is the blood and tears and agony of the working class. And we shouldn't set that aside. And with the crisis of capitalism at the stage that it is today, and it will get a lot worse, as pretty much everyone here I think knows, It's like, you know, this should galvanise us. Like, as comrade that just spoke before, when I forgot your name, he said, yeah, things are going to get worse. They're going to cramp down on us. Think about the Russian Revolution. Like, the Bolsheviks were suppressed horribly. Like, you know, people were abducted, executed, but there was still a successful revolution. And that's the revolutionary hope we need to have to carry the working class to victory. And only the ideas of Marxism can pave the way to that.
I feel like a delegate from Dagenham and Raynham, and wasn't going to come in and say anything because I was rolled off the expulsion for a couple of more years. But I've been a member of that work for 50 years. I don't, not so active in the left as I perhaps used to be and should be. Bogged down as a councillor in Brighton and Dagenham, but normally like fighting the council, a so-called Labour council. That's one of the problems of that. So I didn't really want to sort of be. I was last a delegate I was supposed to be a delegate. There was no choice in turn out, but I was last a delegate in 1983, and that was a year of expulsions, which never worked really in the Labour Party. It made an interesting year, and I've come again as a delegate, and we were in the year of expulsions. Perhaps I shouldn't come back as a delegate from Dagenham. I was a delegate from Union for about 6 or 7 years. Extremely in the late 90s, early 2000s, very boring time to come to the conference. Dreadful. So I wasn't really like, oh, I'm going to see all the people I used to see in the 90s, and I really don't want to be here. But went to the chip shop late last night, and 3 young women came in, and I must look like a potential Keir Starmer support or something. They said, do you like Keir Starmer? I said, no. They said, way! You know, well, this is better than I thought it would be. And then there were 4 young women, members of the Labour, some campaign, I don't know. A couple of minutes later, they asked the same question of me. As I say, I must look potentially some sort of supporter. And when I said no, hey, I thought, there's 8 people in this chip shop. Labour Party members all cheering if you don't support Keir Starmer. So I came out of there with a little bit more hopes than I'd come in the first place. So that was a good thing. And I just wanted to make a point that I agree with Rob on the point about it's not so good for young people now, despite all the promise. In 1967, my family was able to move to from a 2-bedroom place to a 3-bedroom house, and a council position before she'd had the 3rd child, before she was entitled to do it. If you try that anywhere now, let alone in Brighton and Dagenham, you've got no chance of that happening to you. In 1981-82, I could have signed up for got a council flat in about 6 or 9 months. Those things are now absolutely impossible for people. So I've got a thing about housing, I've got a thing about trying to find a way of housing people within the capitalist system, but it's worse, it's far worse for people now than it was then. And it's not so much the homes, but the overcrowding, the people I get crying about it. And there's nothing you can do for them anymore, just absolutely nothing. And it's really sort of depressing in that point. But what it does mean is the point in that sense, the struggle, spell you want, but the struggle, the problems don't go away, and therefore the thing that Rob mentioned about in unions, but also in many ways will be there. And although in a working class area like Barking, we haven't had the sort of the rush of membership that we had in let's say other parts of London. We haven't had that yet. But you can see what's boiling up and what's coming, and the difference that's going to make at some point. So I come with forced here by circumstances that I didn't want to be here. I've had some hope. So I had the meeting tonight, which is again a good thing. But you can see out of that the hope that will be there. It's a matter of keeping up the struggle, isn't it, really? And I hope you should be doing a bit more than a bit less struggle with Barking and Dagenham and more on the political front. But there we are. You do get a bit worn down at times. But keeping up that battle is absolutely essential. That's why I want to.
And then I'll bring Rob back in.
Yeah, my name's Adam, I'm Hackney North CLP and on the Socialist Appeal editorial board. And just want to comment on a couple of questions, which is firstly just remembering where we were at 2 years ago, which was literally in this room, listening to John McDonnell, Dave Ward, Mark Sawatka, Ian Hodgson, Rob Sewell, of course, all talking about the need to bring back Clause 4, which the comrades have brought up this question from the floor. And on that, let's remember what happened at that conference, right? The motion to restore Clause 4 was the very first thing to be discussed at that conference. And it was two Socialist Appeal comrades who went up onto the stage, gave electrifying speeches about the need for Clause 4, the need for public ownership, the need for socialist policies, and that changed the entire dynamic of conference from one of, uncertainty and trepidation to suddenly one that was electrified. Everyone was literally standing applause for those comrades who introduced it. And it was like what we had with Joe today. You saw him come up, when he went on the stage, it changed the whole atmosphere of the conference because of one person making that kind of bold speech. And that's what we need, is more and more comrades who can change the atmosphere in the room, who can change the dynamic within the labour movement. What we saw 2 years ago was, unfortunately, that motion, although it had massive support amongst the delegates, 62% supported it. And yeah, we could get another Clause 4, we could, but let's start with that one, and then let's amend from there, and we can come up with a wish list, we can have a democratic debate. The problem was, a lot of the people on the left didn't want that debate. They didn't want the debate, let alone the right wing. Momentum weren't supporting it, Unite wasn't supporting it. Unfortunately, John McDonnell, having stood on our stage saying he was going to support it, didn't support it. That's the reality of what we faced. And it shows, it really exemplifies in that one instance the task that lies ahead of us, which is to transform the labour movement, to actually build a genuine left within the labour movement, a socialist left, a Marxist left. And what do we mean by that? One which has backbone, one that's willing to stand up on the stage like the comrades did 2 years ago, like Joe did today, and actually tell the truth, say what is necessary, and change the dynamic in the room. That's what we need, and it needs to be not just in the Labour Party, but as comrades said, amongst the youth, which we're doing with the Marxist Student Federation as well. It needs to be done in the unions, because it's the unions who blocked that a couple of years ago. And it's the unions also that have blocked today, I'm sure, the left's ability to strike a blow against David Evans. So we need to transform the unions, which again, comrades of us are doing, involved in the battle in unison, for example. But it just shows the task ahead of us. No one else is going to do it for us. And to do it, we need to build our forces. And that, again, means joining up, getting organised, educating ourselves. It also means getting out there and spreading the ideas. And that's what we're trying to do. And again, the right wing's going to put every barrier in our way, right? They've expelled us. They're trying to purge us. Me and Rob applied for press passes, not as activists, just to cover the conference with our cameras, with our notepads, trying to put the word out there about what was going on. We were barred. We were barred, told that we don't share Labour's aims and values, therefore we're not allowed in. But GB News is in there. The fascist supporting Daily Mail are in there. The Scum are in there. They're all allowed because apparently they support Labour's aims and values. It shows they're going to block us every way they can. And so if we want to build, we've got to build ourselves. And therefore I'll appeal to comrades, make a socialist appeal. Again, join us if you haven't already, but also help us actually build the forces with the means that we need. We don't have any rich business backers. We've got comrades on the door on the way out. We're going to have a tin if you've got change, if you've got notes. We've got the card reader if you can pop a £5 or a £10 on there. Every little helps us in order to build up our resources to take the fight against the right wing. And also subscribe to our paper and get others to subscribe in your CLP, in your trade union, so that they can keep on trying to expel us, but we'll get bigger and bigger faster than they can get rid of us. So those are the three things I implore you to do coming out of this. Donate as much as you can today. Go away, help us subscribe, get the paper out there, help sell the paper in your CLP, in your community, amongst your colleagues, and join us in the struggle for socialism. Thank you.
That was great, comrades. Thanks very much for that. Rob's going to sum up now. Rob, take it away.
Yes, well, obviously I'll be brief because it's been a long day, and I thought the contributions were great. It really makes the meeting, really, because you have to have a flavour. Don't just speak, but what's the response? What are we getting here? What are we doing? Of course, there are those on the right wing who say that Methodism has influenced the labour movement more than Marxism. I don't want to offend people here because we want to use this room again. And I don't want to enter a debate about that, but Marxism is more relevant now than ever before. because the crisis is deeper and more acute than ever before. And of course, consciousness, the people's ideas, it does lag behind. It takes big events to shift things. Well, we know that by experience, you know. People don't like the idea of change, of fundamental change. They will resist it because it's a bit, you know, it's hard stuff. But there comes a time when the back's against the wall, where there's no alternative but to fight. And that's the period we're entering into. Capitalism cannot any longer afford reforms. It can only afford counter-reforms, taking back of all the gains that we have had in the past, which we take for granted, are going to be ripped away from us. And therefore people are going to will think, they will get angry, they will look for a way out. And that's where, if you like, we come in, that Marxism supplies the answer. Now, of course, there are, in the movement, we're not a majority, we're a small minority. The majority views in the Labour movement are what we call left reformist views. That is the idea that somehow we could make capitalism work a bit more nicer. And we can get away with it, but it's an illusion. It cannot be done. Otherwise it would have been done before. Every government in the world is facing the same crisis and the same austerity, same attacks on working class people. And therefore, that's the main lesson we have to have, that our ideas correspond more to reality than their ideas. Ours correspond to the needs of the working class. And as far as we're concerned, we'll fight for every reform, every little gain we'll fight for. But we also know that capitalists will give with one hand, they'll take with the other. It won't be long lasting, and therefore people learn from this struggle. Consciousness changes on the basis of struggle, and people are learning even in the Labour Party and the Union. They've only begun this journey actually, and they're going to draw some very, very radical conclusions that they don't even dream about today, and that's particularly amongst the youth. And of course we are critical of those. Of course we don't pose things in a negative way. We try and be positive and explain, which way, why we should take over the giant companies, the banks, and so on in Britain to plan the economy. Because you can't control, or plan what you can't control what you don't own. It's as simple as that. How many Labour governments have tried to control things, but they try by bribing the capitalists. It's all failed. And that's where the mess we are now. The rational clause 4 is it raised the idea of common ownership. That's all. It's true though. Marxists didn't write it. It was written by failures under the pressure of the working class, by the way. And expressing the idea of common ownership which was an earlier demand, if you like, in the movement. And we supported common ownership, but we translate it into words, into a programme. In other words, we talk about, read Socialist Appeal, nationalise the 100 major monopolies, the banks, the insurance companies, the land, take it over, expropriate. We're not going to pay compensation to the fat cats. To hell with them, they've had enough of it. And have workers' control and workers' management of the economy. That's the way we offer. In other words, we have translated the words of Clause 4 into the realities of today. And we use that in order to explain what we are all about, what real socialism is. The basis, of course, we're in favour of MPs on what, 85,000 a year? You must be bloody joking. Like trade union leaders, they should be on the same wages as the workers they represent. They should be on the wages of ordinary workers. Otherwise, they're there as the bloody careerist. And we're against careerism. We could change the old bloody constitution of the Labour Party. There's loads of things I'd like to put in it. But all I'm saying, we have to fight where we can fight. And where we get an echo, and where we raise these ideas. Because they are most relevant. Yes, I agree with the speaker at the back. Marxism approaches the youth in particular. Marxism makes you young. Look at me, for Christ's sake. I'm only 21. I'm a year younger than Dora. But the point is that, yes, these ideas give you an understanding. Instead of feeling in the bloody dark, where the hell we going, it shines a light on where we're going. What is possible? And to understand the movement of history and the class struggle, which the reformists do not do. They do not see it in class terms, which we do, and understand the movement of the working class. And at the end of the day, it is the working class who are going to change society, and they are the ones who will move to change society. But leadership is critical. Someone mentioned the Russian Revolution. You know, the ruling class in Russia and the general staff in Russia were terrified when there was one Bolshevik in a regiment. Why? Because that one Bolshevik could articulate the feelings and the aspirations of the people in that regiment. In the same way that we will be able to articulate the feelings of young people and workers in struggle itself. But to do so, we have to train ourselves. We can't teach without learning. We have to, if like, conquer the ideas of Marxism, conquer these ideas to be able to explain perspectives and ideas to workers themselves. That's a great job, but look, history has reached a critical point here. That the whole situation is on a knife edge. I'm not saying like tomorrow, 9 o'clock, the revolution, but over the next year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Look at the international situation. China's in crisis now. This collapse of this property company. This could be like a new Lehman Brothers in the United States, where you had all these contradictions are building into this dynamite, into the foundations of British society, this sleepy little Britain. And therefore, we're going to play a vital role. If we understand we need to build the forces of Marxism, for when the working class moves, we're able to link our struggles with their struggles. That we are with them, we offer a way out, and therefore articulate the way forward for the working class itself. And if we have that ability, then we can change society. It's up to us, comrades. No one else is going to do it. And therefore we have to rise to the occasion. And this is a flash in the pan, I would say, this conference. It was looked upon, yes, but, and the big but is what the future holds. And the future doesn't hold stability for the right wing. It holds enormous crisis for the working class, and therefore the organisations of the working class, which are going to be turned upside down. And therefore the opening of our ideas, that's our time. So comrades, let's rise to the occasion, build our forces, and prepare the way for the socialist transformation of society in Britain and internationally. Thank you.
So much, Rob. Thanks to everybody for coming. Check out the stall on the way out. Join us for a drink in the pub down the road. See you next time.